Shalom. Peace be with you. I'm Bob Kite, Bridge Pastor for the Hancock, New Hampshire Congregational United Church of Christ. And I will be making these weekly videos through the rest of this year. If you're here for the first time, welcome. If you are a regular or watch every once in a while, welcome back. I appreciate you spending some time with me, and I hope that what I offer you in my words and understanding may be helpful to you in some way. Well, 2020 has been quite a year, and I think it's challenged us to think about our faith and our relationship with God and our place in this world and how we are to be with one another in some surprising ways. Well, to begin, here's a story from the Gospels. We began this story several weeks ago, and now I'm going to continue it and finish it with the parable of the Good Samaritan. It is from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 10, verses 29 through 37. But wanting to justify himself, he asked Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" Jesus replied, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and fell into the hands of robbers, who stripped him, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. Now by chance a priest was going down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, while traveling, came near to him, and when he saw him, he was moved to pity. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, having poured oil and wine on them. Then he put him on his own animal, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii, gave them to the innkeeper, and said, 'Take care of him, and when I come back, I will repay you whatever more you spend.' Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers?" And he said, "The one who showed him mercy." Jesus said to him, "Go and do likewise." 2020 has been a very different year, a very dramatic year. It's been a year when we've had to learn new things, we've had to look at our lives, and we certainly have had a lot of time during our pandemic lockdown to spend time with our own thoughts. First, we had the virus, as we all know, and the limitations that put on us and our concern for people who got sick and died. Then we've had this very contentious political season that just ended with the presidential election on Tuesday. It's been a noisy year, but it's also been a challenging year. It's one that has made us think deeply about important things. But 2020 was also the year when we thought more about race in the United States, in its history and in our lives now. A lot of us got started on that thinking back in May when George Floyd was murdered by the police in Minnesota. And we were challenged by protesters on both sides to look at our country, but more importantly, look at ourselves. At least that's a good place to start. But that story about race relations has been overshadowed recently because of the pandemic and because of the politics. But race is something that is important for us to think about as Christians and to talk about in our churches. There are conversations about race and race relations in many churches across the country, and many United Church of Christ congregations are having book studies and conversations about the subject of race in America. Well, during those conversations, which were primarily with white people because that is the reality of many of our congregations, someone usually said, "Well, what good is it for us to have this conversation just among white people?" But we have learned that African Americans, black-skinned Americans, brown-skinned Americans have been waiting for white people to have that conversation among themselves for a long time. Now, this is a one-way conversation, I know. You don't get to speak. And I hope that there'll be some way and some day that I can hear your opinions on this subject. because it touches each and every life in America. And it's something that is worthy to talk about in our congregations with one another. And I hope that will happen sometime. But for now, here are some of my thoughts on a very important subject, one that I think Jesus cared a lot about. How did I learn to see color? What happened in my life that taught me that it matters what color your skin is? And I bring this up first because, well, science has taught us recently that there really isn't very much difference between black, brown, white, any other kind of skin-colored human beings. 99.9% of who we are as human beings is exactly the same. I heard recently that if you put a room full of human beings of different skin colors, if you put in a room, a group of human beings of different skin colors, there is so little difference between them based on their genes that we have more in common than an island full of penguins. How did I, Bob Kite, learn to see color? And I do. If I look at a picture of the Supreme Court of the United States, I can't help but notice that one of the 9 is black-skinned. If I watch a basketball game, I can't help myself but count the white players and the black players. If I watch a movie or some show on TV, I can't help myself but notice who's black and who's white and who's brown, even though we're all human beings. How did this happen? Well, I grew up in 2 small towns, first in New Jersey, and then my family moved to Connecticut. And when I was old enough to notice that the only people who lived in these towns had white skin, and I was noticing that there were Americans who had different skin color, I asked my parents, who were good, loving, church-going people, who were ethical people, moral people, but they were people of their time. I would say, why don't we have any black families in this town? I don't have any black friends. I don't have black children in my school classes. They would often say this: well, we're different. They don't want to live with us. They like being with their own kind. But when I was old enough in the early 1960s to see and notice pictures of where black people lived in America, the small towns of the South, the urban neighborhoods in northern cities, I noticed that they were poor. They didn't live in a nice place like I did. And that's when I learned that I had been taught a code phrase. They don't want to live with us. Really meant we don't want them to live with us. A friend of mine tells a story about how he and his brother and sister were in the family car, and the mother and father were in the front. His father was driving, and they were driving from their suburb into the city. And there came a point in this journey, when his father would tell the 3 children in the back, lock your doors. He didn't have to say they were going through a black neighborhood, because just looking out the window taught them that. Why do I see color? Why did my friend learn to be afraid of black people? It's because we were taught. We were taught by good, loving parents, well-meaning people, but it has left a lesson inside of us that we can't get out. And if we think if we just ignore it, it will go away, then we are kidding ourselves. We see color instead of seeing human beings. And until we recognize that and reckon with it, we won't really be able to have that conversation that we hope to have with black people and brown people, so that we can really listen to their stories, which is so different from my story and probably many of yours. Well, let's get back to the story that we know as the Good Samaritan. Well, I'd like to point out first that the word good is not in the story. It's simply a Samaritan. And the difference is important, because we've been taught this story that the Samaritan was somehow better than the priest and the Levite. He was more moral, he was kinder, he was more gentle and generous, he was merciful, while the other two were just cold-hearted. That's not how Jesus told the story, and it's not why he told the story. We cannot fully understand now, 2,000 years later, what it meant for his audience then, his audience of Jews, to hear the word Samaritan. Samaritans and Jews in Jesus' place and time were enemies. They hated each other. Saying that the Samaritan came along and showed mercy on the man was like telling a group of Holocaust surviving Jews that the man who had mercy on the person who was hurting, who was in need of help, was a Nazi SS officer. It's just too much to believe. The Samaritan was just simply a person who saw another person in need of help, and he took pity on him. He didn't see Jew or Samaritan. He didn't care. He just saw another human being who needed a hand up and a little help, and he responded. Where this brings us, I think, is to the religion of Jesus, to our Christian faith and what it requires of us. Because in this story, I think Jesus is telling us that it's much more important what we do than what we say. It's much more important to act with kindness and mercy than to have all kinds of right beliefs. It's much more important for us to see one another as human beings, not as members of one group or another, one tribe or another, which is to say that the religion of Jesus, the way of Jesus, is a way of ethics, not ethnicity. Our religion doesn't bind us into some neat tribe that's better than everybody else's tribe. It's a religion of what we do. It is a religion of ethics. And in that sense, I think it is wonderful. It is different. I'm not saying other religions are wrong. At the heart of Islam, at the heart of Judaism, at the heart of all the world's great religions is the same idea that we are all human beings and we should care for one another. We should love God and love our neighbor. And that is the word that Jesus was using to try and answer the man's question, who is my neighbor? And the answer is any other human being who needs your help and you can give it. I'll end with a story about our youngest grandchild. We have 6. We're very fortunate. The youngest is named Vivian, and we know her as Vivi. She lives with her sister Lily, who's 6, and her mother and father, Andy and Fiona, in Rhode Island. And when we were able to travel and see them, we were down in Rhode Island one time, and this was about when Vivi was around 2 years old. She'll be 3 this December. And Fiona, her mother, was out at the store and took Vivi with her in the car and came back with a big smile on her face because she had a story to tell. And the story goes this way, that when Fiona and little Vivi, 2 years old, was in the supermarket, Vivi saw another little kid, who's her size, another 2-year-old, and held out her arms and toddled over to the other 2-year-old and threw her arms in a big hug to the other 2-year-old, who hugged her right back, and they held each other and danced around. And Fiona thought it was the most wonderful thing she'd seen in a long, long time. And even just in hearing it, it just lifts my heart. Somewhere along the line, Vivi's going to be taught that skin color matters. Somewhere along the line, she's going to learn that she's white and other people have black skin and brown skin, and all that comes with that. I just hope and pray, and I trust that her parents will work in whatever way they can to keep that little light within little Vivi bright and alive when she sees someone else, whether she's 2 or 12 or 22, and still has the urge to go over and hug and dance with that person. Why do we notice color? We have been carefully taught. But we don't start out that way. And I know I have been taught a lesson by a little 2-year-old. And perhaps you have too today. Come and pray with me. Holy God, we come to you with sorrow in our hearts, with regret for the things that we have been taught and were foolish enough to follow. Help us to see through the eyes of Jesus that we are not this or that, but we are one. We are all your beloved children, O God. And as you show no fear or favor in dealing with us, may we also be as loving and generous and kind to one another. Help us to remember day after day, hour after hour, that what you ask of us, as Jesus taught us, is simple. To love you, our God, who gave us this life, this world full of beauty and wonder, and to love our neighbor as ourselves. And help us to remember that there are no qualifications, no definitions of neighbor except the one who is near us. Oh God, there will be opportunities this week when we may see the world as you want us to and as Jesus has taught us. May we open our hearts, may we open our minds to your truth this day, and may it make our lives better so that we may make others' lives better also. May we be grateful for our blessings, and may we learn to be blessings to one another. And hear us now as we end our time of prayer, our conversation with you in the words that Jesus taught us. And may they go deep within us, and may we live their words this week. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen. I wish you a good week. I hope there'll be some nice surprises and adventures for you. I hope there'll be opportunities for service. I hope there'll be moments of joy. I hope there'll be wonders to appreciate and that they make you smile. I hope that you have many blessings this week. And I hope that you'll come back next Sunday for the next week's weekly message and prayer. Bye-bye.